Hello, welcome back to the Police Report, the channel we share everything about crime stories and forensic science cases. We can't deny that dog is humans' best friend, but can it be our best friend in any time? Today our case is about a crime which involved dog attack. Is a dog attack or is a murder? Before we continue the video, please don't forget to give a like and subscribe our channel. On January 4, 1989, paramedics in Emory, Texas, were summoned to the rural Wayne County home of Debbie Tucker Loveless and her common-law husband, John Harvey Miller. They found Loveless' 4-year-old daughter, April, wrapped in a blanket on the kitchen floor. Then the 4-year-old girl was rushed to the hospital. An artery in her leg was completely severed. The little girl died shortly after arrival to the hospital. The medical investigator believed the leg wound was no accident. Emory, Texas is a small farming community with a population of less than 1,000. Life is simple here, peaceful and quiet. In 1988, Debbie Loveless sent her 2 daughters from a previous marriage, Amy and April, moved in with John Miller. He too was divorced and worked in the construction industry. John Miller was kind and he took care of Debbie and the kids well. They had a happy home life. John and Debbie liked spending time with their 2 kids, like a close-knit family. They then moved on to a 5-acre farm, few miles outside of town. It was complete with a house, barn, and family pets. For our children freedom to roam and play among the beauties of nature. 4-year-old April loved living on a farm, climbing trees and running on the grass. She was a bubbly and energetic girl. Just after Christmas on January 4, 1989, the couple's older daughter Amy headed for school. April went outside to play. Debbie did her chores in the house. John was working on an old building on the corner of the property. Around noon, Debbie called for April to come home for lunch, but there was no response. Then John came running towards the house carrying April, who was bleeding profusely from a severe leg wound. When Debbie saw a black and blue April, she was being hysterical. April's right leg fell open when there was a large gash in it all the way to the bone. She has a very small amount of time in which to get help and survive. John was a trained paramedic. There was nothing he could do, because April had lost too much blood. The 4-by-6-inch gash in April's leg had torn away a large portion of her femoral artery. It was just like a whole section of her upper leg gone. Doctors did everything they could to save April's life, but the damage was just too great. 4-year-old April died on the operating room table. John told police that he found his stepdaughter nude under a tree and bleeding profusely from a leg wound. According to John, April said the dogs did it. An autopsy was ordered, and the suspicious was murder. John Miller said his daughter April, before her death, told him that the dog caused her fatal leg wound. The local sheriff's department suspect foul play. During the autopsy, the pathologist noticed long vertical marks and puncture wounds all over April's body, which he believed were indicative of some form of abuse, and he saw no indication that April's leg wound was caused by a dog. Since the wound did not have the jagged edges often seen in animal bite, the wound was cleanly cut, and the pathologist concluded it had been made by knife. The conclusion was that April had been murdered. As John and Debbie returned from April's funeral service, they faced a full-scale investigation. Police were everywhere going through their house and walking everywhere outside. Police believed that dog couldn't have done that to April. Police found April's blood on a fence post and some leaves, but found no other outward signs of any dog attack. There were 3 dogs on the property, 2 belonged to the family and the third belonged to a neighbor. None of the dogs had shown any hint of violence before. In Debbie and John's home, investigators found paraphernalia allegedly linking to the couple to be a cult. Police thought maybe the cutting of April's leg was a bloodletting ceremony for a cult. Police also collected an electric curling iron, thumbtacks, and pushpin, items suspected of causing the scratch marks and puncture wounds on April's body. Next, they asked the couple repeatedly for the knife for hours. John's hunting knife was confiscated and all of the items were sent to the crime lab for analysis. A presumptive test showed possible signs of blood on the knife, and with the finding, John and Debbie was charged with murder. They were both given lie detector tests. Debbie passed, but John did not. At the trial, Debbie and John were represented by court-appointed attorneys. One of the lawyers did not want to use the dog attack story as a defense. No one believed what John said, and he basically had nothing to fight with. Prosecutors portrayed John as the enraged stepfather who got angry with April, lost his temper, and abused and murdered her. Debbie was portrayed as a battered wife afraid of her husband to do anything about it. Based on the evidence, the autopsy reported that April had been murdered. The items from the couple's home, which were suspect of causing the wounds. John Miller's court-appointed attorney, Paul Chitwood, asked the judge for more time to interview prosecution witnesses, and he also requested funds to hire his own forensic expert. Both requests were denied. A defense chemist testified that original tests on John's hunting knife, which found was presumptive. Further testing on the knife showed it wasn't human blood. No blood was found on the curling iron and the pushpin or thumbtacks. The possibility of dog attack was never presented to the jury. Even in the final arguments, one of the defense lawyers admitted it was a murder. The jury found John and Debbie guilty of murder and sentenced them to life in prison. When they were put into the jail, the steel door closed. They knew that's not going to open again. John Miller started fighting the day he got in. He wrote to the congressman, Lieutenant Governor, instead of spending money have a good meal. He spent lots of money on stamps. They claimed that they were innocent, convicted of something that they didn't do. As the years passed in prison, Debbie and John's first concern was for their older daughter, Amy, who was living in foster care. The second concern was finding a way to prove their innocence. They still claimed that they were innocent when people said they were guilty. They maintained that April was playing outside and was unclothed because it was a warm day. They believed that one of the dogs attacked April while she was playing. At lunchtime, when they were looking for April, they saw the dogs were agitated. When John followed them into the woods, he found April bleeding profusely from a leg wound. John said April told him that dogs did it before she lapsed into unconsciousness, but the pathologist who performed the autopsy ruled the death a homicide. Attorney Robert Ardis was assigned to handle the couple's appeal. He's one of those attorneys that renews faith in the legal profession with good heart. He won't stop digging until he gets where he thinks he ought to be. While in the courthouse, sifting through the evidence on this case, he found a box containing hundreds of photographs of April's wounds. Most were autopsy photos which had been shown to the jury at the trial, but he also found another set of photos taken just after April entered the emergency room. These were photos that had not been shown to the jury, and it was unclear whether John and Debbie's original defense lawyer had ever seen them. When Ardis compared the two sets of pictures, he made a startling discovery. The pictures of April's leg wound were different. The pictures looked like the dog had been involved in April's death. Then he sent the photos to a forensic pathologist at the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Science in Dallas. After studying the photos, he said that this child had been attacked by a dog. If something with canine teeth, what the pathologists were able to show how a dog's teeth would just overlay exactly on the puncture wounds around where the plates had been taken out of leg. Dr. Dennis Eason is a forensic odontologist and agreed that animal bites are often difficult to identify. He said that animal bites don't look like bite wounds at all because animals often tear the flesh rather than biting it. But if dogs had caused April's leg wound, why didn't the original pathologist see this? Because the wound looked different at the autopsy. It had been cleaned and trimmed with a scalpel while the surgeon attempted to repair the wound and save April's life. The new team of pathologists note that many of the scratch marks on April's back consisted of 4 parallel lines corresponding with the 4 nails of the dog's 4 feet. There were also paw prints shown on April's body. As long as the person is alive, those particular bruises that had the print of paw would not show up. When April died on operating table, then the blood handled on those paw prints on her back, and it made those paw prints apparent. Now there was a new hope for a new trial. After spending 5 years in prison for the murder of their daughter, John and Debbie finally had forensic evidence to corroborate their story that one of the dogs on their property has attacked and killed April. Attorney Robert Ardis also uncovered a written deposition from a woman who had witnessed the dogs in John and Debbie's farm attacked 3 different people on 3 separate occasions. But the woman wasn't called to testify at the original trial. Armed with this new evidence, Ardis requested a new trial. His argument that John Miller and Debbie Loveless did not have adequate counsel at their original trial. Ironically, John Miller's original defense attorney Paul Chitwood agreed. He testified on behalf of John and Debbie at a pre-trial hearing. Reminding the court, he requested and was denied access to the prosecution witnesses before the trial and was denied funds to hire an adequate forensic expert to analyze the evidence. He always felt John and Debbie were not guilty of the murder of their daughter. In 1993, a judge dismissed the case against John and Debbie, citing overwhelming evidence in the couple's favor. After 5 long years, they were finally released from prison. After they came out from the prison, they separated. Their life had been destroyed because of the bad investigation. Who can pay them back the 5 years of time living in the prison?